Boldwood presents The Flatmate, written by Gemma Rogers and read by Imogen Church. The moral right of the author has been asserted. This performance is owned by Boldwood. Prologue. Livvy. The club is loud and sweltering. Condensation drips from the ceiling mixed with spilt alcohol, leaving an oily film on the dance floor. Bass from the speakers reverberates through my entire body, making my organs throb in rhythm to the beat. My fingers and toes pulse, tiny little shocks quivering as I sway in time with the music. Lifting my arms in the air, I close my eyes, music flooding my system, enjoying the sensation of my hair stroking my shoulders as I move. Sweat pools in my cleavage. The top I've worn is too tight, and I long to be free of it. In the distance, across the dance floor, I see my friend and work colleague. Ria has her tongue down Jayden's throat, but no matter. It's all good. Lights blind my eyes as the strobes and lasers bounce off the packed dance floor. There's a hand at my waist, and then it's gone. Sticky bodies collide together in the small space. I've forgotten about my aching feet, how tired I was before, longing for my bed. It's already past midnight, yet the party is just getting started. The night is still young, and the DJ drops another tune, making the crowd whoop. Their gyrating becomes more energetic, more exaggerated. I love them all. Every single one. We are in this together. The people I know and the ones I've yet to meet, all part of the euphoria. My heart is racing. Beads of perspiration cling to my forehead, hair matted, mouth dry. I crave water, but I can't stop. I have to keep moving, absorbing the atmosphere despite the strange tingling and warmth spreading through my body. Every track the DJ plays glues me to the dance floor, until finally I give in, breathless and dazed, leaning against a smooth pillar for support. Its surface sleek against my palms. Every sensation is amplified, and I've never been so at one with my body. A dark-haired stranger tries to talk to me, but I can't understand a word he is saying despite him leaning in, his hot breath on my neck. The music is too loud, and my head fills with a throbbing beat that will not stop despite moving off the dance floor, longing for fresh air. Struggling to swallow, my mouth full of sand. I begin to shiver. Something isn't right. My balance is off, and white streaks of light invade my vision. Stumbling in the direction of the toilets, I look around for my friends, but they are nowhere to be seen amongst the throng of clubbers. They are too busy celebrating the yearly internal awards after-party. Typically, there is a queue, and a girl grumbles when I knock her arm as she waits, my spatial awareness off. "Watch it!" she snipes as her friend giggles. "She's off her face!" I sway, knees weakening with every minute that passes. I long to feel the cool tiles against my skin. The sensation of my insides burning makes me hunch over. "Is she going to be sick?" "Let her go first, otherwise she's going to spew everywhere." We reach the front of the queue, and the girl shoves me ahead. I skid to my knees amongst high-pitched cackles. Crawling into the empty cubicle and pushing the door shut behind me, not even bothering to lock it, the laughing outside taunting me. I heave, but nothing comes up, and I rest my forehead on the bowl, the temperature of the porcelain a relief. I have no idea what is happening, but I know it is bad. I didn't drink that much, but I need help. I open my mouth to speak, to call out to the girls at the sinks, but my tongue is too large, and I can't form the words. My eyes roll, breathing shallow. Time is slowing down. Chest in a vice. Shooting pains fire up my arm, but I can't make my legs move at first, despite trying to draw them in. With enormous effort, gripping the seat, I heave myself upright, leaning against the wall for support. My legs are made of sand, and I'm dripping with sweat from the exertion. I close my eyes for a second. I have to get help, but I'm not sure I can walk. Forcing my weight away from the wall, I wobble, knees giving way beneath me. The fall seems to happen in slow motion, yet there isn't time to engage my brain and get my arms to brace. My knee hits the bowl first in the cramped space, and my body crumples forwards, forehead connecting with the porcelain cistern with a thump. Slumped on the floor amongst the discarded cigarette butts and toilet paper, my vision fades, and everything goes black. Chapter 1. As soon as the wheels touched the tarmac, my lungs constricted. An ironclad grip squeezed until all I could focus on was my breathing. I was back on English soil, autumn in full swing, but there was no comfort. Everything I'd been running from the past 5 months, the pain, guilt, and grief, came flooding back, and in a split second, it was like I'd never left. I'd exited one nightmare into another. "Come on, Ria, you can do this," I muttered as I patiently waited for the seatbelt light to go off, my palms beginning to sweat, anxiety rocketing. "I'm sorry," the woman next to me said, believing I was talking to her, despite neither of us uttering a word since we'd taken off from Nice. "Oh, nothing," I replied, smiling tightly as passengers around me jumped up, spilling into the aisles like someone had fired a starter gun for a race I didn't know I'd entered. "I don't know why people have to rush," the woman tutted, taking off her glasses to clean the lenses on her jumper. I gave a non-committal shrug, staying in my seat and ignoring the urge to join the throng. If I was getting back to my life, facing my demons head-on, I might as well get on with it. 5 months ago, I'd boarded a plane to Seville with the intention of travelling around Europe, although I didn't get further than across the border to France. I winced as I gazed out of the window at the murky sky, drizzle smattering the glass, and then down at my Converse plimsolls. They'd be soaked through in a matter of minutes, but it hadn't occurred to me to dress for a chilly late October evening back in the UK. Around this time, I'd be sitting down to devour a cassolette and a glass of red wine, followed by a walk along the beach, bathed in the warmth of the setting sun. The woman in the next seat, in her bright orange jumper, clearly had thought ahead. My stomach gurgled, and I wrapped my flimsy cardigan tighter around my middle, standing awkwardly to retrieve my suitcase from the overhead compartment. The decision to return home had been a hasty one, spurred on by an argument with my mother. As I'd thrown my clothes into my tiny suitcase, I hadn't considered the autumnal weather, leaving for the airport while she slept, as I imagined her berating me about running away from my problems yet again. She wasn't wrong, but I didn't feel safe there. I never would. I shuffled off the plane along with everyone else, contemplating the temperature of my flat, wishing I had one of those apps where I could put the heating on remotely. At least I didn't have far to go. Where I lived in Crawley was only a 10-minute drive from Gatwick Airport once I got through passport control. I hadn't checked in a bag, so theoretically I could be home by 8 o'clock and, if I was lucky, tucked up in bed by 9. 5 months ago, leaving hadn't been an option, but a necessity. I'd sunk into a downward spiral since losing my best friend in an accident and was barely functioning. We'd both been looking forward to the annual award ceremony, organised by Cardinal Media, a top brand advertising company that worked on bespoke projects. Once the formalities were over, the party had moved on from a hotel to a club in Brighton, where drinks had flowed and Class A drugs were passed around like sweets. Livvy and I never touched the stuff, both of us having no interest in gurning the night away like we'd witnessed our colleagues do. Consequently, I was shocked and appalled after a toxicology report confirmed she'd had ketamine in her system. She'd fallen in the toilet, hitting her head and causing a massive bleed on the brain. When she was eventually found, she couldn't be revived. My gorgeous friend, who I'd only known for a year, had died alone inside a cubicle on a dirty toilet floor. I was beside myself with guilt and grief, but no one wanted to talk about it. Drugs were a dirty subject, and her death was brushed under the carpet, hushed up to stop any bad press associated with Cardinal Media. The others there that night were reluctant to admit to any drug taking in case they had the finger pointed at them. Neither me nor Livvy's parents could comprehend her taking anything illegal, especially when, like me, she'd always been against it. We were in complete denial. I felt responsible. While I'd been dancing, I hadn't noticed Livvy leave the crowd. If I'd searched for her sooner instead of creeping off to snog Jayden in a dark corner, I could have saved her life. Livvy was 22 when we met, a year younger than me, and we'd clicked as soon as I joined the company, both of us starting on the ladder as junior executives. She'd had a great sense of humour and was fun to be around. It was a work hard, play hard atmosphere at the company, and we poured ourselves into it, striving to meet each target, grab every bonus available, and climb the corporate ladder. After Livvy's death, work had become impossible. I was always late, rolling in looking like I'd just got out of bed most of the time I had. My budding relationship with Jayden, an account executive, had fizzled out, and I became so anxious I barely left my flat. The image of Livvy's pale, sweaty face Her blue lips and limp body slumped on the floor stayed with me constantly. It drove me slowly mad. I hadn't contributed anything to the company in a month. The fountain of creativity had dried up along with my ideas, and Chris Lightfoot, who owned the up-and-coming advertising agency, was well within his rights to sack me, but he suggested a sabbatical, some time out to get my head together. He'd assured me I wouldn't have to worry about the rent whilst I was away, and my job would be waiting for me when I got back, so in June I'd booked a ticket to Seville. I'd planned a hedonistic few months doing some soul-searching and trying to get over my loss, but it hadn't worked out that way. I ran out of money sooner than expected and ended up working at a bar in Malaga throughout August and September, spending my wages on alcohol and hostels. In the end, I decided to put a stop to the cycle and visit Mum and her boyfriend, flying first to Paris to soak up the Parisian life until the money was gone, then reluctantly moving on to my mum's in Nice with my tail between my legs. Asking for another handout. I only managed 2 weeks before we were at each other's throats. My turning up was an inconvenience to her much older French-Algerian boyfriend Tarek. He'd made that plainly clear, up until the last night, at least. It wasn't the first time my mother had put Tarek before me. In January, she'd decided to relocate to Nice with him after he'd been lured back with a job offer, and suddenly I was homeless at 23. Yet again, Chris had come to my rescue. In what was supposed to be a temporary measure, he'd put me up in the company-owned flat, a lovely 2-bedroom modern place less than 5 minutes' walk from the office in the centre of Crawley. I paid rent, of course, but as I was doing well, it allowed me to save for a deposit for a place of my own. But now, it was all gone. I was back to square one and needed to return to work and replenish my savings. Tired and deflated, I made my way through passport control, calling a taxi when I reached the exit to take me home. Shivering and taking shelter from the persistent drizzle, I wished I was back in France. Time had seemed to stop there. It was like a parallel universe, one that no longer existed. When Commonwealth Drive came into view and the flats with their illuminated windows blinked through the darkness, relief flooded my veins. In a matter of minutes, I could be inside, taking a nice hot shower, washing the stink of travel from my skin, and climbing into clean pajamas. I lugged my suitcase up the stairs, avoiding the queue for the lift. There was always a queue, so many parents with buggies or people with shopping, and it was only 2 flights to climb. As I reached number 12, digging out my keys, my skin prickled and unease slid over me. Something was off. I checked I had the right door number, shaking my head at how stupid I was. Of course it was the right number. Pushing the door open, I froze. Sounds of laughter carried from inside the flat. All the lights were on, heat blasting from the hallway radiator, and the background noise of a television. My television. I crept inside, quietly lowering my suitcase by the door, which I left open in case I had to dash back out again. Who the hell was in my flat? Did I have squatters?
I think that's the one we should go for. It's so vibrant.
A plummy voice floated through from the living room, and I edged closer. until a pretty platinum blonde came into view. She turned to gape at me, her steely eyes narrowed to slits before she uttered, "Who are you?" Chapter 2. Ria? Jayden's face was a picture. His eyes wide as I took a few more steps inside to see the both of them sat in front of the sofa on the rug, seemingly going through documents scattered on the coffee table, a glass of wine in hand, perfectly at home in my flat. This looks cozy, I smirked, unable to stop the irritation radiating off me. What are you doing here? The blonde's eyes had changed. No longer were they clouded in confusion. You're Ria, she said as if she knew all about me. Would someone like to tell me what on earth is going on? I snapped. It was like I'd walked into an episode of The Twilight Zone. Jayden got up and hastily gathered the papers together, sliding them into his satchel. I'm sorry. I didn't realise you were back today, he said, his voice overly jolly, avoiding my eye. I'm Amanda, Blondie said, standing in front of me and holding out her hand to shake as if stating her name explained everything. My temples thrummed with an incoming headache. Okay, Amanda, I said, enunciating every syllable, ignoring her outstretched hand. Why are you here? Oh! She giggled, and I had to resist the urge to slap the smirk off her face. I'm your new flatmate. Her voice was annoyingly trill, and I couldn't work out if it was that making my eye twitch, or the fact a minute ago she was cozying up with my ex-boyfriend in my bloody flat. What do you mean? You're my new flatmate, says who? I frowned, forehead creasing, intensifying the thudding in my brain. Amanda is the new junior exec. She's moved back to Crawley from Broadstairs, so Chris offered the other bedroom in the flat until she finds something else. Jayden flung his coat over his arm, keen to leave the awkward confrontation, but I was blocking the exit. Amanda was Livvy's replacement at Cardinal Media. The realization a knife in my side. I glanced at the sideboard, the photo of us celebrating my birthday still in pride of place. It hurt to look at her. I'll see you at the station at 7:30, Amanda, Jayden said, clearing his throat in a signal for me to move. I stayed rooted to the spot. We're going to see a client in London, 9:00 meeting, he continued, as if he needed to explain their spending time together on a Sunday night over a bottle of wine. I raised my eyebrows, and Jayden's face flushed. It's good to see you back, he said, squeezing past me and out the door. Bye, Jayden. See you in the morning. Amanda called over my shoulder before resting her gaze on me. I'm sorry. It's been a bit of a shock. I'll get out of your way. It's fine, I sighed, knowing I had no right to call so fast. It wasn't my flat after all, but it still felt like an intrusion. I'm just tired. It's been a long day. I'm going to have a shower and go to bed. Locking the front door, I carried my suitcase through to my bedroom, relieved to find it looked exactly as I left it. Well, there's milk in the fridge if you want a cuppa, and I'll be up and out early tomorrow, Amanda said, rolling onto the balls of her feet outside my room. Thanks, I replied, mustering a weak smile before closing the door and slumping down onto my bed. I'd longed for the creature comforts of my own home, not to mention the peace and quiet I hadn't had at Mum's. I didn't want to share the flat with anyone, and it put a damper on my return. It was my space, and I was used to living alone. I knew nothing about Amanda, although sharing the flat with her would no doubt give me a crash course. She looked about my age, maybe a little older. Her hair had to be bleached. It was practically white blonde, and I was already envious of her full lips and the dimples in her cheeks. I guessed Jayden might find her attractive. Had he been hitting on her when I'd rudely interrupted? We were polar opposites in every way, my stomach hardening as the stab of jealousy came. I was short and petite, whereas Amanda seemed to tower over me, nearing Jayden's height. My hair was shoulder length, dark and curly, hers poker straight and long with a middle parting, like a 90s Kate Moss. We couldn't have been more different. But what did I expect? I was hardly going to come back after 5 months for Jayden and I to pick up where we'd left off. Everyone had moved on, and I couldn't hold it against them. It was only me still reliving Livvy's death on a daily basis. I had to get back to the old routine and fast. Tomorrow, I'd go into work, have a chat with Chris about my return, and see if I could resume the life I'd left behind. I couldn't believe he hadn't warned me I had a new flatmate, although after a quick check of my phone and a cursory search of my emails, which I'd been deliberately ignoring, I saw he had. He'd sent a message weeks ago letting me know Amanda would be moving in. Unfortunately, it looked as though I was stuck with her and she was stuck with me, especially as all my savings for getting my own place had gone. Beggars couldn't be choosers. I listened to the sound of her moving around in the kitchen, the chinking of mugs and kettle boiling. I rolled over, groaning into my pillow, unable to fully relax, almost wishing I'd stayed the other side of the channel, but I couldn't. Not after Tarek. I stroked the tender skin on my wrists and shook his leathery face from my mind. This wasn't the return I'd visualized. I didn't want to live with a complete stranger. In my head, I heard Livvy's voice chiding me. She doesn't have to be. Livvy had been much more fun than I was. She was outgoing and approachable, taking me under her wing immediately when I started at Cardinal Media. If she was in my situation, she'd make the best of it. Amanda could be a new drinking buddy or ally at work. One thing she'd never be, though, was Livvy's replacement. I busied myself unpacking, piling clothes in the corner to wash tomorrow, already missing my nightly visits to the beach in Nice, where the waves rolled gently and the breeze felt cool after the warmth of the day. But I had to move on, especially after how things ended with Mum. It wasn't a surprise. Mum had always been selfish. Throughout my childhood, she was so desperate to find a relationship, a replacement for my father. Men came and went like a revolving door. Most of them only after her inheritance left by my grandfather, but she was blind to it. Mum was young when she had me, only 17, and although I knew she tried to be the best mother she could, it was hard. I was an accident, a blip, and although she never voiced those feelings, I heard her loud and clear. I mourned the relationship we should have had, the bond my friends had with their parents. Girls and their mothers were supposed to be close, but I guess my mum never got the memo. Angry at the sour end to my sabbatical, I grabbed a towel and headed for the bathroom. The living space was open plan, a large lounge and kitchen with doors to the bedrooms and bathroom leading off the one room. The colour scheme was typically neutral and inoffensive. Vanilla and beige striped wallpaper and beige carpets. Boring, Livvy had insisted when she'd suggested I paint the kitchen a sage green over the insipid paper. Amanda was leaning against the oak worktop, a mug of steaming tea in one hand and her phone in the other.
I made you one, just in case,
she said brightly, awarding me a smile with annoyingly straight teeth. Oh, thanks, I said, sounding a little more petulant than I'd intended. What was I, 12? I hurried into the bathroom to hide my embarrassment. Amanda was only trying to be nice, and I was acting like a brat. We had to live together for the short term, whether I liked it or not. Turning the shower to as hot as I could stand it, I stepped beneath the stream of water, hoping to wash the tension away. There was no lock on the bathroom door. It hadn't occurred to me I needed one before now, but knowing I could be burst in on at any moment made me rush. I hadn't brought my toiletries bag in, and Amanda's bottles of shower gel, shampoo and conditioner lined the shower surround where mine used to live. All of the toiletries I'd not taken on my travels had disappeared. I used a tiny amount of the body wash, knowing if it was the other way around I'd be annoyed at the overstep, but it was either that or not wash at all. When I got out, I checked the mirrored cabinet on the wall, but nothing of mine remained. Amanda had a gift set from Lush, hair serum and tampons stashed inside. Had she thrown all of my stuff out? Mildly irritated, I intended to ask the question, but Amanda was no longer in the kitchen. Clutching my towel to keep it in place, I turned to find the door to my bedroom wide open, a rustling noise coming from inside. Chapter 3. What do you think you're doing? I asked, curtly, finding Amanda bent over the bed, holding my mobile phone.
I'm sorry. It kept ringing. Someone's obviously desperate to get hold of you, she said, her brow furrowed, holding the phone out to me. I knocked on the bathroom door and shouted, but I don't think you heard me.
Let's stay out of each other's rooms, okay? I replied, taking the phone from her.
Of course. I'm sorry.
Amanda looked crestfallen. Her shoulders slumped, and she hurried from the room as I checked the call history. Mum had called 3 times in quick succession. Had it taken her all day to realise I'd packed up and gone, or had she waited for Tarek to be out to get in touch? My shoulders shuddered at the thought of him. His patchy beard like a sunburnt lawn, yellow tobacco stains on his fingers. I rubbed at the tiny bruises starting to develop on my wrists and pushed the memory of last night from my mind. I was in a different time zone, only an hour behind, but over 800 miles away. However, I still didn't feel safe. I knew Mum would be remorseful at how we'd left things in the cold light of day. We weren't conventional, but deep down she cared. So I sent her a text to let her know I was safely back in the UK, but I wasn't ready to talk. My phone ringing was still no reason for Amanda to be in my room. I wouldn't dream of walking into hers to answer her phone. We'd just met half an hour ago. I clenched my jaw, gnashing my teeth together. I'd have to set some ground rules if this was going to work. I woke to the noise of the front door slamming, rolling over to see it was 7:15. The sound an instant reminder of what I'd arrived home to last night. A house guest I wasn't prepared for, that I didn't want. I groaned. I hadn't slept well at all, despite being back in my own bed. Nightmares plagued me, and the presence of another person in the flat, although irrational, made me uneasy. I'd have to get over it. What choice did I have? Shrugging out of the duvet, I padded to the kitchen and stuck the kettle on. The tea Amanda had made for me last night was still on the counter, a white film now floating on the top. It was a guilty reminder of my sullenness. Impatiently, I searched through cupboards trying to find tea bags, which weren't where they usually were, in the cupboard above the kettle. Everything had been moved. The cups were in the cupboard the plates had been in. The cereal and tins were where I'd put biscuits, crisps, and snacks. Jesus Christ, I muttered under my breath. Amanda clearly had no problem making the place her own, even down to labelling which cupboards were mine with post-it notes. Except it wasn't her place, it was mine. Well, more mine than hers, anyway. I'd have to sound Chris out about how long she was intending to stay. I hoped it wouldn't be long. When I approached the glass-fronted Cardinal Media office, trepidation at going back inside made me skittish, and I managed to push the revolving door the wrong way, almost squashing Fiona Hutchison, the HR manager, on the way out. "Rhea!" she exclaimed, pulling me into a hug when she reached the pavement. "You're back!" She grabbed me by the shoulders, holding me at arm's length to look at me. She was every part the executive in her high-necked cream blouse, emerald green trousers, and ankle-length camel coat. Her highlighted hair perfectly coiffed in an elegant chignon twist. "Hi, Fiona. How are you?" I said, heat radiating from my face under her intense gaze. "I'm fine, but never mind that. How are you? You look so well, lovely tan." "I'm sure it won't stick around long," I replied mournfully. "Do you know if Chris is in?" "I've just left him, actually. He's got a meeting soon, though, so best get in quick. It's wonderful to see you." Fiona finally released me, nudging her Kate Spade handbag up her arm and giving me a wave goodbye before heading towards the shops. If she hadn't seemed in such a rush, I would have asked her about Amanda, but I'd save that conversation for Chris. Watching Fiona hurry out of sight, I pushed my way through the doors, smiling at Michelle on reception, who was on the phone. She waved, her eyes widening at my unexpected appearance as I hurried through the glass double doors and down a corridor to where the office was. The area was mostly open plan, in a large L shape. Desks were in clusters of 4s and 6s, partitions separating them. The account managers and junior executives sat together on one side, and around the corner were the finance and human resources team, although they mainly kept themselves to themselves. The air smelled of strong coffee and cinnamon, a reminder of Monday morning meetings with warm pastries to start the week. And Livvy arguing passionately about which logo was better suited for the up-and-coming menswear brand in the meeting room. Heads began to turn at the sound of my name being called, And before I knew it, I was surrounded by colleagues asking about my trip. I tried to talk as though it had been a holiday, a chance to get away rather than a desperate need to escape for the sake of my mental health. Everyone chipped in how lucky I was to have 5 months in the sun and away from work. The mood was buoyant, and no one mentioned Livvy. She was the elephant in the room, and my every nerve was on edge, waiting for someone to bring her up. "Ria, welcome back!" Chris came out of his office, roused by the commotion, and leaned in to grasp my hand in an awkward shake. I inhaled the familiar Dolce & Gabbana aftershave. It was an anchor and incredibly comforting. "Hey, Chris," I said, giving him a watery smile as he looked down at me, his face an array of emotions. Cardinal Media had been built from the ground up by Chris, and he was the father figure for many of his young employees, a role he took seriously despite only being in his early 40s and yet to have children of his own. It wasn't often you could say a manager genuinely cared about his staff, but there was no doubt he did. I was sure he could be ruthless when he needed to be, but I'd never seen that side of him. "Shall we have a quick chat? I've got a little time before my next meeting," Chris said, checking his watch and gesturing for me to go ahead into his office. Inside, I perched on the bright orange chair. It was the only colour injected into this monotone office scheme. My pulse accelerated as he sat in front of me, steepling his fingers. "It's so good to see you. How are you?" "I'm doing okay, actually," I lied, although I was surprised to feel better being back in the office I was dreading returning to. "When did you get in?" "Last night." "Ah," he pursed his lips. "I guess you've met Amanda then. Did you get my email about her being your flatmate for a while?" "About that," I began, palms sweating, but Chris raised his hand, interrupting me. "It's a temporary roof over her head. Like you, Amanda just needs to get on her feet." I nodded, a strained smile on my lips. It seemed it wasn't up for discussion. "Has she replaced Livvy?" The words were out of my mouth and sounding bitter before I could stop them. Chris frowned. "You know no one could do that," he sighed. "But yes, she is our new junior executive. We limped along as we could, but without you as well, the account managers needed support. We've taken on 4 new clients in so many months, big ones. Amanda started with us in July, almost 4 months now." Chris rubbed at his beard, waiting for a response. "That's great," I managed, my stomach in knots. "So, do you feel ready to come back to us? You've been sorely missed." I was still shaken up after bolting from Mum's and wasn't really in the best headspace, but it would be good for me to focus on something. Having too much time on my hands wouldn't be wise. I had to keep my brain busy. Forcing a smile, I tried to inject some enthusiasm into my voice. "How does tomorrow sound?" I suggested, and Chris clapped his hands together. "Fantastic!" I grinned, a real one, brought on by Chris's eagerness at my return. He was welcoming me back into the family, and warmth spread through my veins. "Will I be working with Jayden again?" I asked, watching Chris's smile fade. "Well, Amanda is working on the accounts you had with Jayden. She's doing well, so I think I might pair you with Aaron." It was my turn to frown. Aaron used to work with Livvy. It seemed Amanda wasn't so much Livvy's replacement, but mine. Chapter 4. I stepped out onto the pavement after my chat with Chris, shoulders looser than when I went in. I feared I'd see Livvy everywhere inside the office, around every corner and in the reflection of every pane of glass. Her absence there would be a stark reminder of what I'd lost. My best friend. But it was different. The atmosphere had shifted, almost like she'd never been a part of Cardinal Media. Life had carried on without her, and I had to too. I couldn't help but be disappointed I wouldn't be working with Jayden again, but perhaps it was for the best. Too much time had passed. Our fledgling relationship had ended the moment I'd booked my ticket for Seville. Chris didn't have a rule against dating colleagues, as long as any drama was kept out of the office, and it had been early days between Jayden and me. The drama had been Livvy's death, and Chris was as devastated as the rest of us. He'd been good to me, giving me the opportunity for a sabbatical and offering to keep my job open for when I was ready to return. I owed him a lot, and I was going to throw myself back into the role and prove to him he'd made the right decision. I was worth waiting for. Chris had taken a chance on me right back at the beginning. Most employees had a degree of some kind, graphic design or marketing, but I'd rocked up with my portfolio and some relevant experience at a local magazine asking for an entry-level role. I'd got the job at Sussex Life straight out of school at 18 after doing my A-levels in English, language and media. Initially, I was employed to write film and book reviews before branching out to cover local events. I hadn't wanted to leave and go to college once I'd started earning my own money. By the time I approached Cardinal Media, I was designing my own features for the magazine and practically running the small website. But I wanted more. At the interview, Chris had been swayed by my buckets of enthusiasm and ambition for a 23-year-old, hiring me for barely over the minimum wage, promising I could work my way up. In less than 3 months, true to his word, I'd been awarded 2 pay rises and a chance to work with Jayden on some specific client requests. We'd been a good team, spending time outside the office, working on designs and marketing campaigns. He'd looked pretty cosy with Amanda yesterday, and I wasn't sure whether, like us, work had spilled over into something more, but I couldn't let jealousy cloud my judgment. I had to get back on track. On the way home, I picked up some shopping, stacking it in my designated cupboards. I wasn't used to being told where to put my things, and I couldn't deny it irked me. 2 loads of washing later, I looked around for something to fill the time, but the place was spotless. There was no tidying or cleaning to be done, and I hoped Amanda wasn't obsessively neat. I wasn't messy, but I didn't want it to be like living with my mother, who tutted every time I put a cup down without a coaster. Settling on the sofa, Amanda's closed bedroom door was in my eyeline. Flicking through the television channels, my gaze kept falling on the door, although I tried to ignore the urge to look inside, attempting to concentrate on a program about couples finding new homes abroad. The compulsion gnawed at me. I was alone. Amanda wouldn't be back for a while. It wouldn't hurt to take a peek, would it? Just to find out some more about my new flatmate. Before I could talk myself out of it, my fingers were around the doorknob, twisting it slowly. It sprang open and I jumped backwards, expecting to find someone on the other side. But it was only tightened hinges that made the door pull. Chuckling at the scare, I looked around the room, which looked the same as it had before I'd left. A typical guest bedroom. Despite it now being occupied, there was no personalisation, no photos on the mirror or makeup left on top of the dressing table. It was still bland and uninviting. Nothing to give me any idea who Amanda was. In fact, it barely looked lived in. As I turned on the spot, surveying the ordinary room, my phone rang. I jumped out of my skin at the shrill sound coming from the lounge and hurried to answer it. It was a withheld number, so I declined the call, likely a double-glazing salesman. But seconds later, it rang again. This time I answered it, the phone barely at my ear before I heard Livvy's voice calling my name. "Hello?" I managed, the words sticking in my throat. There was a delay, as though it was a call centre in India trying to get through. My heart leapt into my throat as Livvy's unmistakable voice called out again. "Riri!" she giggled. I clamped my hand over my mouth, unable to believe what I'd heard. Riri was Livvy's nickname for me. "Riri!" she said again, and shrieking, I launched the phone across the room and watched it skid to a stop on the kitchen laminate. I didn't believe in ghosts. I knew Livvy was gone, but it had been her voice calling my name. I sank down onto the sofa, my entire body shaking, unable to take my eyes off the phone, which had landed face up, still illuminated on the floor. Someone was still on the line. After a few seconds, the screen darkened, the call had been disconnected, but I couldn't move. It had to be a recording or something. Either that, or I was losing my mind. Livvy was not calling me from beyond the grave. "I told you not to go in the lift." Jayden's voice came from the front door, followed by Amanda's girlish giggle, both of them coming to an abrupt stop at the entrance to the lounge when they saw me. "Oh, hi, Ria! I just got stuck in the lift. The bloody doors wouldn't open." "I told her about the lift. Remember when we got trapped inside?" Jayden laughed, putting his satchel on the counter. With my heart still racing, I mustered a smile at the memory, recalling how we'd spent the 10 minutes until the lift had got going again. "Are you okay? You look like you've seen a ghost," Jayden asked, frowning at me. "I'm fine," I managed, my throat like sandpaper as I tried to shake off the lingering unease. "Is this your phone?" Amanda bent and picked up the handset, putting it beside Jayden's bag. I nodded. "Want a tea? I'm gasping." "No thanks," I replied, watching Amanda and Jayden move around the small kitchen. "You're back early?" I said, the tremor still in my voice. It was only just 4 o'clock. "Jayden said we should sneak off. We haven't been back to the office," Amanda said conspiratorially. "Chris won't mind, not with the business we've brought in today," Jayden remarked. I remembered they had gone into London for a client meeting. Amanda looked stylish in a dark red calf-length skirt and blazer. A slick of red lipstick was the pop of colour against her platinum hair and creamy skin. She was striking, and today she wore black-rimmed glasses, which made her look even more professional. I had no doubt she fitted in well at Cardinal Media. Smart, but trendy. They joked amongst themselves, easy in each other's company, as if I wasn't there, and I did my best to concentrate on the television and still my shaking hands. I hadn't had time to process hearing Livvy's voice. If Jayden had been alone, I might have told him about the call, but Amanda didn't know Livvy. She was a stranger, and I wasn't about to let my guard down in front of someone I barely knew. Hearing Livvy's voice was like being struck by a cattle prod. Who would pull such a hurtful stunt like that, and why?
You haven't been in my room, have you, Ria?
I turned at the sound of my name to see Amanda staring at her open bedroom door. Shit! I'd forgotten to close it. No, sorry. I knocked it with the hoover and it sprang open. It's a bit feisty, that door, isn't it? I said, plastering on a smile and watching her eyes narrow for a second before mirroring my expression.
It is, isn't it? Frightened me half to death when I moved in. Seems to have a mind of its own.
I could